But joining us now is Ryan Anderson. He's the co-author of What is Marriage, Man and Woman, A Defense, and the William E. Simon Fellow in Religion and a Free Society at the Heritage Foundation. Ryan's been at our table. We've had this debate before, Ryan. Before we have it again on whether or not there was any federal power to regulate marriage, let's just start with the opinion that was ushered today. What do you think about the DOMA opinion deeming it unconstitutional?
You know, it really doesn't make much sense, especially the two opinions in conjunction. Because on the one hand, they said that the states have the right to define marriage. But then on the other hand, they said the California citizens who voted twice to define marriage as the union of a man and a woman, that they couldn't defend their marriage law in court. So if you want to say that the states have the right to define marriage, and then the citizens of California do that twice, why aren't you letting them defend their law when their governor and their attorney general refuses to do so?
So Ryan is making by the way, just to be clear about that argument, Ryan is making a standing argument. That was a big issue in both the Prop 8 case today and the DOMA case. Who has the ability to challenge these laws? I think the standing issue is an important one. It's not necessarily one we're diving into, at least yet. And I don't know that it actually relates itself, SE, to federalism.
Yeah, and I think whatever your feelings about gay marriage, and, I happen to support gay marriage, so I think DOMA was unconstitutional. I think this is a victory for proponents of marriage and gay marriage, but I also think this is a huge conservative victory if you happen to really appreciate the 10th Amendment. This was not just forcing the federal government to acknowledge gay marriage. It's forcing the federal government to acknowledge the power of the states. There is no other way to view that.
Let's be fair. I mean,
other than as a small government victory.
The American left will forget about this federalism argument as soon as they don't want it. I mean, this is
Go ahead, Ryan.
Only today.
It's a misunderstanding of how our Constitution works. That's not what the 10th Amendment says at all. So the Defense of Marriage Act didn't dictate anything to the states. The Defense of Marriage Act left all 50 states free to define marriage.
That's not what I said, Ryan. I said what it said was it defers to the states. But it also defined marriage for federal policy in federal law. Which means that the federal government has to acknowledge that. That is a states' rights small government victory.
No, that's really not, because the federal government has authority for making federal policy that touches on marriage for federal purposes.
Of course it does. This is not a complete victory, but it was a partial victory.
No, it really is not, because again, in our constitutional system,
you can keep saying no, it's not.
For state
but of course
purposes.
It is when a state says, here's what we've decided democratically within our state, and the federal government, you must acknowledge it also. That is a
the federal
states'
government
rights
does.
victory.
For state purposes, you are married in that state. But for federal purposes, the federal government gets to define what is a marriage. When the Congress passes a law saying we're going to treat marriage in this way, it gets to say, this is what we mean by marriage. So in every law that Congress passed up until the year 1996, when it used the word marriage, they wanted to make clear when they passed the Defense of Marriage Act, this is what we mean by marriage.
And
the states
the
can't impose their view on marriage on the feds any more than the feds should impose their view of marriage on the states. Federalism works both ways.
I was just going to say that the notion that this is sort of a victory for states' rights, this is the left and sort of liberals in America all of a sudden for this one case saying that we like it here, but they're going to toss it out tomorrow on gay rights and on legalization of marijuana. They're all of a sudden very pro-states' rights.
Well,
and
I'm not
really,
a liberal.
Really a big
I'm
fan
a conservative.
Of that. I understand that, but I'm just saying that we can't hold this up as a victory for states' rights.
I can.
In this case,
I absolutely can, and I will.
Because it's not a principle they're establishing. It was convenient in this case, and so they're willing to hold it up now.
I don't care why. There's a reality.
And just because tomorrow they might turn around and push back on it doesn't mean that it's not a victory today. It doesn't mean it's not something that we can stand and point back and say, hey, you guys pointed to this before. Remember that, and actually have the chance to win.
I'm also troubled by the big
one at a time.
And just as a political matter, it is true that in 1996, when DOMA was signed into law by Bill Clinton, no one believed that Bill Clinton believes in the sanctity of marriage, people. That was obviously cynical and political, and he was trying to get cover for himself. And the passage of DOMA, I think it is fair to say, was being used as a bulwark against the spread of gay marriage. That was very much in mind of our legislators. And if our Supreme Court said, and that's not really the way to go about it, as a political matter, I happen to agree.
For those of us who are hoping, and we had this discussion before when Ryan was at the table, for those of us who are hoping that this would be more of a personal thing and it would be between you and your church and everything, by the way, what you've seen here, you've gotten a window into people who want to use the state to force people to agree with them on these issues. It's not going to to be the
I
libertarian.
totally disagree.
You can all yell no at me. I didn't even get to finish what I was saying. I mean, this is the third time now. I'm just trying to point out.
The third time you speak, get to your point. What is it you are saying?
I'm trying to say that for those of us who are hoping that government would be less involved in marriage, this actually is showing us that there is an animus towards people to be able to even do what they do on their own. You have to actually be okay with marriage as it is now.
Federal government
The truth is what both of you are saying, Anthony and Buck, what both of you are saying is actually absolutely true. Today was a victory for federalism. Today was a victory for those that want to see government in the hands of the states. What happens in the future, Buck, I think you have a right to be skeptical about. Why did four justices...
skeptical.
Why did four justices, to your question... Hey, Ryan, I promise in one moment I will let you speak. Why did four justices join Justice Kennedy today? I don't know. That's a good question. Was it an embrace of federalism? Justice Roberts suggested we're going to remember your vote today on federalism. Or was it simply a reflection of animus towards...
That is my point. Thank you. It's not about
Buck,
federalism.
I just said
I know. I'm just trying to high-five you. That's what I've been trying to do.
Let me let Ryan in. Ryan wants in.
The federal government took itself out of the definition of marriage and it gave it to the states.
That is the victory.
Let
me let Ryan in.
Because there was already a law passed by Congress that was the state engaging in marriage, and this is just trying to back out of it.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, so I'm going to make 2 points, if you'd let me. The first is that one of the absurdities of this ruling is that for immigration policy, for example, the federal government sets immigration policy, and it takes marriage into account. So if you're an immigrant and you're going to Texas, and you're an immigrant and you're going to Massachusetts, the federal government now has to treat you and your relationship in 2 different ways because Texas has same-sex marriage, Massachusetts doesn't. It would make much more sense for federal policy to have one understanding of what marriage is, which is why the federal government shouldn't be held captive to the states. But the second point is, if today's decision is really a victory for federalism, why weren't the voices of 6 million California citizens respected today? Everyone who's cheering states' rights, what about the citizens of California who passed a law twice defining marriage as a union of a man and a woman?
We have to separate DOMA from Prop 8,
Why wasn't their right respected?
You can't
have to separate the
conflate
standing issue. We have to separate the standing issue from the merits of federalism.
They are not the
On
same.
the issue of immigration, this is exactly why the federalism is important. Because federal law is treating people differently in both states, and because it's appealing to immigrants, and that does mean that you're not being treated equally. It does mean that states in Massachusetts, if you're an immigrant, your rights are not going to be treated the same as if you are in Texas. That is problematic.
Healthy competition,
You now also have a Supreme Court case. You now have a decision that has come down that says that any opposition to gay marriage comes of one place and one place only, and that is bigotry. And anyone who does not think, and I've been saying that people should be allowed to do this for freedom purposes, and we've agreed on this. And because of individual freedom, people should be allowed to marry who they choose. However, this is now saying that any opposition to it for a church or anyone else comes from bigotry.
The decision doesn't say that, but the language, rhetoric.
And he did not go far enough.
That's absolutely the case. But let's also point out something on standing. And on the standing issue, all it said was that the people of the court, or the people of the state of California, cannot challenge this in court. It has to be the people. It has to be the attorneys in the state of California.
I got to leave it here. Ryan, I'm sorry. I've got to leave it there. We'll all go into the break talking over each other for the next 5 minutes. It'll be great. Thanks for being with us tonight.